Did Italy extradite the migrant smuggler known as the General? Or is the Eritrean they have in custody the wrong man? The UN backs a fast-track response to ending HIV/AIDS. And how a dance school in Lagos is making a classical Western dance more appealing to young Nigerians. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Tonight, the African Union force in Somalia says it has repelled an attack by the Al-Shabaab terrorist group and killed more than 85 fighters on Thursday. Officials and residents say the militants detonated a car bomb and then tried to storm the Ethiopian base in the village of Halgan, about 260 kilometers north of Mogadishu. Al-Shabaab claims its fighters overran the site, killing 60 African Union soldiers with the loss of 16 of its militants. Colonel Joseph Kibet, a spokesman for the AU force, AMISOM, however, dismissed Al-Shabaab's toll as a falsehood, adding that Ethiopian and Somali government troops managed to drive back the pre-dawn assault. Well, Italian police say 5 alleged people smugglers are being detained in the Sicilian port of Pozzallo on Thursday after being picked up a day earlier with 222 migrants as they tried to reach Italy by sea. Now, the 5 men, identified as all Egyptians, were taken into custody in Ragusa, Sicily. The arrests come as Italian and British police embark on investigations to determine whether they caught the wrong person in a much-hyped anti-smuggling operation said to have netted one of the world's most wanted people smuggler. Methan Yedeho Mered, the man officials believed was the people smuggler nicknamed the General, was extradited from Sudan to Italy on Wednesday. Now, 3 close friends and a family member of the detainee insist that he was the victim of a mistaken identity. Now, for the latest on the possible case of mistaken identity, journalist Christopher Livesey joins me live via Skype from Rome. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Vincent.
Now, what is the latest that you know about this investigation?
Well, we know that investigators are moving forward to find out exactly if this is the smuggler that they're looking for. We know that the lawyer of the person in custody says that he will be interrogated by police in Rome tomorrow morning. But as to whether or not they have the right person, as to whether or not Italian law enforcement has the right person in custody, that's still a mystery. They haven't claimed any guilt. They say that they're performing checks, but they also haven't verified 100% whether or not this is the correct person.
I mean, if he ends up being the wrong person, what an embarrassment it will be. What are people saying? Because some may look at this as something that perhaps was seen or was going to help the European Union or the Europeans shift attention a little bit to someone else other than their inability to solve this problem.
Yes, it certainly would be embarrassing if these reports do turn out to be true. I think it's clear that European law enforcement in general were looking to have a victory in the mounting migrant crisis, which for years now has only made Europe look rather unprepared and unwilling to address a problem that has been broadcast across the world now. And I mean, we see the horrific death toll that only increases every year as the number of crossings of migrants across the Mediterranean Sea increases every year. And European leaders only look more and more unprepared. In particular, this would have been a great coup for Italian prosecutors because the suspect in question, at least the person they were looking for, is accused of being responsible for a shipwreck in October of 2013 in which 359 migrants were killed off the coast of Sicily. So that would have been a great media victory for them.
But now that all is a little dicey. What's the government saying?
The government is not saying much at all. They're being very cautious in their remarks. They have only said that they are thoroughly performing checks to make sure that they have the right person in custody. Tomorrow morning, they will be questioning the person in custody. But of course, the question still remains whether or not that is the right person.
We'll wait and see. Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Christopher Livesey reporting live via Skype from Rome. UN investigators accuse the Eritrean government of 25 years of widespread and systematic human rights violations amounting to crimes against humanity. Now, a group of Eritreans recently gathered in Washington, D.C. to remind the world of journalists jailed in Eritrea, many of whom have not been heard from for over 15 years. Salim Solomon has our report.
In September 2001, Eritrean authorities launched an unprecedented crackdown on the free press. 7 of the country's independent newspapers were shut down. At least 11 journalists were arrested in the roundup, and several more were jailed the following month. None of them have been heard from since that time, and their whereabouts are unknown to this day. The Committee to Protect Journalists says approximately 17 journalists are in prison in Eritrea, although reliable figures are difficult to come by, and it's not known how many of the prisoners remain alive. A group of Eritreans gathered recently at an event in Alexandria, Virginia, to share stories about the journalists and advocate for their release. The event, titled Memory for Forgetfulness, was less of a political event and more like a group remembering lost friends. Among the attendees was Robel Asrat, whose brother Emmanuel Asrat was arrested on September 23, 2001, and has been held incommunicado since then.
After the 6 months, we were completely in the dark, and those whom we asked weren't able to give us information, and they told us not to look for him anymore. We still hope to see him, and my parents have never stopped praying for his release.
Robel says he wishes he could pass on a message to his brother.
He always repeated one word, resilience. I would ask him to be resilient like his word. There is no problem that stays the same, and one day the problems that look like mountains will be lifted, and he will see the light he has been prevented from seeing.
The 2001 crackdown on journalists in Eritrea came at the end of a war with Ethiopia. On September 18, 2001, 15 high-ranking officials in Eritrea's ruling party published an open letter to President Isaias Afwerki calling for a reform in government and accusing the president of taking actions that were illegal and unconstitutional. The letter, as well as interviews with the dissident members who became known as the G15, were widely published. What followed was a severe constriction of free speech in the country. In a 2003 interview, he told Radio France International, "You cannot say a spy is a journalist. In the middle of the war, we had to check them. We had to say enough is enough." But Youssef Berhe said that newspapers were playing a vital watchdog role in Eritrea.
One of the good parts of newspapers is that opinions of regular people were being published, including letters, so they had access. That was a good thing. If that continued for 5 to 10 years, how great that would be.
Abraham Zere said he's not optimistic that space would open up for journalists anytime soon.
I wouldn't guess that there would be free press in Eritrea in the near future, as long as the regime is there and it is not going to allow free press. It is continuing to get worse, and there is not a turning point. I don't expect change or even forgiveness for the ones in jail. We have no hope that they will release those in prison because they are adding crime upon crime.
Others hoped that even if the event does not have a political impact, it keeps the memories of the jailed journalists alive.
They will be the monuments people will remember.
Salim Solomon, Washington, D.C., VOA.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, the United Nations pledges to scale up the fight against AIDS. Stay with us.
Where does the Zika virus come from, and how many people around the world are affected? I am Dr. Ruiz. The Zika virus is an emerging mosquito-borne virus, and the World Health Organization has declared the Zika epidemic a global emergency. Over 20 countries have reported the disease, and there is no cure. Among the symptoms are fever, rash, and redness of the eyes. Anyone with symptoms should get plenty of rest, drink fluids, and treat symptoms with over-the-counter medicines. Learn the facts about Zika. Education is your first line of defense.
Well, it's time now for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with an update on the fight against AIDS. Lino.
The United Nations General Assembly has adopted a political declaration aimed at accelerating the fight against HIV and ending the AIDS epidemic by the year 2030. Speaking Wednesday to the Assembly at the opening of the high-level meeting on ending AIDS, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said the world had already achieved the 6th Millennium Development Goal by reversing the spread of HIV/AIDS, reducing new infections by 35% and AIDS-related death by 43%. He says this progress, quote, could not have happened without the leadership of people living with HIV. The political declaration, which was adopted by consensus, reaffirmed member states' commitment to protecting the rights and dignity of all people living with and affected by HIV and AIDS. Joining us now from the United Nations is Sharon Ann Lynn, HIV Policy Advisor for Doctors Without Borders, MSF's Access Campaign. Ms. Lynch, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you are participating in the meetings at the UN. What is your take on the political declaration that was just adopted?
I think it's incredibly ambitious in terms of governments represented here by the member states at the UN having signed the dotted line to essentially double the number of people on treatment within the next 5 years. Also, to raise the money needed to do it. So there is a lot to be proud of in this declaration. Now, what matters, though, is tomorrow. The declaration also commits governments to provide immediate HIV treatment to every person living with HIV upon diagnosis. This is a big shift. It is supported by science, but from what is happening now on the ground. Essentially, what's been happening is because of low resources, there's been a rationing of treatment, so that treatment has been allocated to only the sickest of the sick. And now, unfortunately, we have been sending people away from clinic, telling them, even though they're HIV positive, to come back when they're sick. So this represents a big shift. This is a World Health Organization sanctioned recommendation to provide immediate treatment to all people living with HIV, and now member states just agreed to it. So what needs to happen tomorrow is scaling up treatment as soon as possible to every single person living with HIV as early in their disease progression as possible.
Now, in a report released not long ago by MSF, which is called Out of Focus, MSF says that West and Central Africa are basically left behind when it comes to access to treatment and other services. What is happening?
So essentially, there has been a tremendous amount of success over the last 16 years of scaling up ARVs in the public sector in countries. Now, this goes back to the first UN discussion on HIV in 2000. In 2001. At that meeting, there was still a debate whether to scale up HIV treatment at all. Now, the good news is that more people are on treatment than ever before. And in Africa, for the first time, there are more people on treatment than there are new infections. However, in West and Central Africa, in these 25 countries, what we're seeing is that 1 out of 3 people living with HIV do not have access. You should also know that 1 out of 4 deaths worldwide last year occurred in West and Central Africa.
And
what we see in
very critical,
because
we're going to wrap up very soon. How do we close the gaps, though, between needs and services if we are to attain the 2030 target? Very quickly.
So in West and Central Africa, Michel Sidibe, the executive director of UNAIDS, issued a challenge for member states, for the international community, to triple the ARV therapy initiation rate in West and Central Africa. That's what can happen in West and Central Africa if there's the right amount of political and programmatic and financial support. Worldwide, we know we can reach the targets, but it's a matter of speeding up, scale up, and again, starting tomorrow.
Okay, Ms. Lynch, thank you so much for joining us from the UN.
Thank you so much.
And that was Sharon Ann Lynch. She is HIV Policy Director for MSF's Access Campaign. Now, researchers say a new vaccine is showing promise in the fight against HIV, and large-scale clinical trials are set to take place in South Africa late this year. Researchers in South Africa are expected to soon start conducting trials on a vaccine for HIV. This news comes after promising results were seen in a previous trial held in Thailand. Dr. Linda Gale-Becker is the Deputy Director of the Desmond Tutu HIV Center.
The first indication that this was at all possible was with the clinical trial that was conducted in Thailand. It was reported in 2009, and it showed the first reduction in HIV acquisition by an HIV vaccine. And so really that galvanized the world. And we have spent the last 5 or so years preparing to bring a very similar regimen to South Africa to see if we can not only, show the same results, but actually improve on those results. So the components have been modified so that they are relevant and compatible with the circulating virus that we find in Southern Africa.
The people who received the Thai vaccine during the trial had a 31% lower risk of becoming infected with HIV 3.5 years after vaccination compared to placebo recipients. Although not enough protection to warrant licensing, the results were widely held by some experts as a breakthrough in the long struggle to develop a vaccine against the rapidly mutating virus. The large-scale trial in South Africa called HVTN 702 comprises 5,400 volunteers and is set to start in November. It will be conducted in various parts of South Africa to include a wider spectrum of the population.
We'll be able to tell the South African public by, it sounds like a long time, but this work, needs to happen by 2022 is what we're looking at. We hope then to have a signature, if you like, of what tells us this vaccine is going to work very well.
Although this is not the first HIV vaccine trial to take place, the researchers believe the 31% success rate in the Thai trial is a good starting point from which to create a vaccine with better efficacy. More than 6 million South Africans are infected with the HIV virus. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch with me, find me on Twitter @Lenore. Vincent, back to you.
Well, Lenore, thank you very much, and I'll be sure to watch Lenore Mudu's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, Malawi has one of the world's highest rates of child marriage. Half of the girls are wed before their 18th birthday, and nearly 1 in 8 is married by age 15. But since a new marriage law came into effect, one person has been on a mission to reverse that trend. Viewers, Maria Diallo has more.
She's known as Chief Kachindamoto, and she's managed to break up 850 marriages involving children under the age of 18 in Malawi. She says nothing makes her happier than seeing some of the former child brides back in school.
I tried my best to see these girls to be a lot in classes. So as you can see, indeed, I'm a happy chief.
A hereditary tribal chief, Kachindamoto left her longtime job as a secretary to lead 900,000 people in central Malawi's Dedza district 13 years ago. In a country where child marriage is deeply entrenched in society, the chief has had a difficult but not impossible task.
There is mother groups, and we have these community policing, child protection workers who are looking each and every house to follow these children.
Judith Kabango was married at 14 and has a 4-year-old son. Kabango's marriage was annulled by Kachindamoto.
I wasted valuable time, but now I am in full-time learning and making a future for me and my child.
Stories like Kabango's are shared by countless girls in Malawi. Via Skype, Joyce Makandawire, Malawi's country coordinator for Rise Up, an umbrella organization that fights to empower girls worldwide, told us the story of Josephine.
At 15 years old, she has 2 children This girl was married off at 12 years old. And the reason why, according to her, she said because of poverty and because she lost her parents because of HIV and AIDS.
With their help, Josephine is now back in school. Following advocacy efforts by civil society and people like Mkanda Wire and Chief Kachindamoto, the country's parliament last year passed a law raising the minimum marrying age to 18. But the new law may be in conflict with Malawi's constitution.
The constitution itself still allows for parental consent under the age of 18. So we see this in many countries where there's a tension between the letter of the law and the Constitution saying one thing, a piece of national legislation saying another thing, and then customary or tribal law saying another thing altogether. And then the question is, how do these pieces fit together?
Thompson also says it's important to invest in dismantling the root causes of such marriages, including poverty and gender inequality. In Washington, Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, bringing a classical dance form to Lagos. We'll be right back.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Everyone has a bad internet day. Now, even rock stars, Guns N' Roses frontman AXL Rose is demanding that an image he claims was released without his consent or approval be removed from the internet by Google. The image in question was taken off the Guns N' Roses frontman at a 2010 concert in Canada and published in the Winnipeg Free Press. Now, that photo was quickly stolen off the newspaper's website and used to make memes mocking Rose's weight. AXL has hired British company Web Sheriff to yank the picture down. But even if the picture is scrapped, the hundreds of smart Alex memes will remain. Well, and finally, in a studio in downtown Lagos, a group of dancers are going through their paces, repeating turns and plays. The ballet lesson held at the Society for the Performing Arts. Many of the dancers had never encountered ballet before. Some thought it was too Western and were reluctant to join the classes. SPAN was opened in 2004. Since then, over 100 dancers have passed through the school's doors. And the school's founder says she decided to start the school after she noticed how important dance was in local communities. She believes her ballet dancers are slowly winning over audiences. Even young hip-hop dancers at the school have added ballet to their repertoire. And that is what is trending. We're turning now to the world of entertainment. Today, I have part 2 of my conversation with Ama K. Abrebese, a leading Ghanaian actress who played a supporting role in the critically acclaimed movie Beast of No Nation, starring Idrissa Elba. I sought her thoughts on what some say are extremely explicit scenes in recent Ghanaian movies.
Having lived in Ghana for 6 years, nothing surprises me. It's easy to sit, somewhere else and watch something like, oh, this would never happen, or that doesn't happen. I used to be one of those people until once you live on the continent, you see that, okay, some of these things seem a bit weird, but yet it happens. These filmmakers, the fact that a lot of times some of these things that we find cringeworthy are the ones that people keep watching and people keep making, means I don't think they're doing it to be negative. I think they're doing it because they feel like those stories need to be told.
Where do you see the future of film in Ghana and your future in acting?
The future is bright. The future has to be bright. I think we've made a progression. I think in the beginning, when Ghanaian cinema began, you had the likes of Kowansa making amazing films. I love Brood in an African Pot. And, you know, at the time, we were known as at least the hub of filmmaking in West Africa. Times changed. You know, we went through some low-quality movies. We've had some ups and downs, some high and lows. And I think right now there's some amazing filmmakers coming out of Ghana, coming out of Nigeria. It can only get better. I think, you know, the global village is definitely opening up. There's a lot of productions coming onto the continent to make movies, either in a collaboration effort or to make films and, you know, and leave. And for me, I just want to be able to continue being part of films which will not only have a significance in terms of impacting people, how they feel about certain issues about the continent, but also just being involved in more quality productions and telling our stories, you know, fully telling our stories and taking it to the world where they can look at like, wow, okay, we didn't know that about Africa, we didn't know that about, you know, and let's try and move away from so many of the usually overtly negative stories. We've had a few of those. Let's try and move and, you know, tell more biopics about some, you know, the Nkrumahs and, some of our leaders.
How has film affected your personal life? We know in Hollywood, once you become famous, you really don't own your life anymore.
The whole celebrity thing in Ghana is nothing like Hollywood. You have a few people say hello to you in the mall and so forth. And people are usually very, very appreciative. They don't intrude too much in your life. I don't think, nobody follows us. You know, paparazzi doesn't follow us. So it for the most part, is very pleasant.
Is there anything else you think you may want to mention that I've probably neglected or not remember to ask you?
I don't know. I think I don't know if you want to talk about Beast of No Nation because it was like the big movie. That was the latest one I was in. But I don't know anything you wanted to talk about.
That's your last big movie?
Yeah. Obviously, that was a Netflix. That was a huge one.
And what did you, what can you tell us about it in a few seconds?
Beast of No Nation was a movie which I co-starred in with Idris Elba. And the breakout star, Abraham Atta, who I play his mother, Agu. And the story is about child soldiers. And we shot that in Ghana with a production crew, which was made up of people from US and, you know, Africa, South Africa. And then the cast was pretty much hugely African cast. And that was an amazing project to work on because it was a low-budget independent at the time we were shooting. And when we finished, Netflix bought it out. And then when Netflix bought it kind of took it to whole new scale, and I'm so proud of my on-screen son Abraham, who has gone on to win amazing awards in the Best Actor Independent Spirit Award, and also he won at the Venice Film Festival as the Best New Young Actor. And I was just so happy when he graced the Oscar stage to present an award this past Oscar. So it's just amazing just seeing somebody, and he was cast out of nowhere. And just seeing him just move and just working with the amazing cast was just huge. It was just amazing.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words.
Does this word mean something good has happened?
Unleashed. The president is sending Secretary of State John Kerry to the Middle East to help build a coalition to defeat the militants who have unleashed a wave of violence that has included attacks on Iraq's Christians and other minority communities, and recently the videotaped killing of American journalist James Foley.
Unleashed means to let something very powerful happen quickly.
It is like taking a leash off a dog and letting it attack someone. In our story, the militants unleashed or set off a wave of violence.
Usually, unleashed does not mean something good.
So, the next time you hear the word unleashed, you will know what this news word means.